Good evening, all, and welcome to the 2021 Black Thought Expo, State of the Black State. I am so excited to have you here, and it is with much appreciation that I welcome you. This is the last event of our Black Thought Expo, and we have been so pleased to share this time with you in community, highlighting and amplifying Black voices in New Mexico, focusing on those issues that are important to us. The State of the Black State has been a dream in my head for our state for a long time. This idea is completely the theft of someone else's idea. I envisioned this for us for our state in 2008 when I was flipping through the channels. You all remember when we used to flip through the channels? We didn't have our Netflix list to go from. Well, back then, there was this thing, the State of the Black Union, that was on C-SPAN every single year. And I know many of you are saying, what's exciting on C-SPAN? Why would you steal an idea from that? Well, I was flipping through the channels and I saw this amazing image. It was a stage full of Black people sitting in white, comfy living room chairs. It was so exciting to me that I had to stop and just think and listen and look. It was the idea of Tavis Smiley, who started the State of the Black Union, which every year was televised on C-SPAN. And it brought together prominent thinkers, prominent leaders from our community, talking about issues that were specific to us. In that moment, I started thinking, I have to know what these people are going to say. I have to know what message and mentorship they have for me. And I just wanted to know, how in the world am I going to be motivated this morning? And I was. I listened to Cornel West. I listened to Tavis Smiley. I listened to all of these people who were there presenting as experts. They were presenting data on us that was presented by us, that were solutions coming from us. And I so badly wanted to see that. I wanted to see it for New Mexico. Tonight and tomorrow, I hope you're going to join us tomorrow as well, is more than just a realization of New Mexico getting something similar to that moment. It is a promise, New Mexico, a promise that is for us, by us, of what this state can be for us. I'm a transplant to New Mexico. I moved here right after grad school. My parents were living here, and after graduating, I had no idea what the next step was going to be. So of course, moving in with my parents seemed like a really great step. And it also seemed to me like, well, that wouldn't be so bad. Of course, my parents said that is so bad and you need to go get a job and get your own place. And that has been how I ended up here in Albuquerque. Since then, New Mexico has been so great to me. I've been offered multiple opportunities to grow and shine and connect. The beauty of our state makes me happy every time I'm driving home from work towards those amazing mountains. I have been able to build community and connections just because I'm going to the grocery store and I run into somebody who can share an idea with me or share what they're working on. I have worked in entry-level jobs where I've been able to call up representatives and senators and CEOs and invite them to collaborate with me. And they say, absolutely, no problem. You're part of the community, we'll be there. But New Mexico has also been difficult for me, and I'm sure difficult for you as well. It's been difficult to maneuver because it can feel like there is very little acknowledgement about the disparities that our community faces. Since I moved here in 2004, I have heard far too often that we are not statistically significant, that data cannot be done on us because we are too small of a population. I have heard far too often that we know that the outcomes for Blacks in New Mexico mirror what's happening in the nation, but we just really can't do anything for you. We can't have programs that are created for you. I have also heard far too often, we want to do something for the Black community. We are eager to meet your needs, but can't you just join what everyone else is doing? Or the other thing that I hear is, well, we wanted to do something, but we just didn't know where to put it. Where is the Black community again? It has just been far too easy in this state to assume that our needs will be naturally met by just doing something for everyone. That if you do something for all, it will impact all, and Black people will get better. Your lives will be improved simply because we acted out of the kindness of our heart for everyone. But we know this isn't going to move us forward, and we know we need better. We need culturally responsive programs and culturally responsive services. We need people to acknowledge our history. We need people to acknowledge that not only do we mirror the disparities that are happening in other Black communities across the nation, there is something unique and specific about what is happening to Blacks in New Mexico. We need something by us, for us, solutions that come from us. And this is the year. I have seen so much in New Mexico this year that shows me that there is a promise for us here in New Mexico. I have seen things that have been happening for years in our community be highlighted in new spaces and with new people. I have seen decision makers and power brokers stop themselves and ask the question, why has it taken me so long to understand how this would impact Black people in my state? I have seen new voices in our community be highlighted. I have seen all of us be highlighted on bigger stages. And I have seen us mobilize in new ways. It has been an exciting year to see how New Mexico is growing to acknowledge the Black community and see us make our own space to educate others on our experience in this state. The state of the Black state that we're having tonight and tomorrow is only a moment in all that the different Black communities in New Mexico have been doing throughout this pandemic year. So in this moment, we will talk about all of the ways that things can be by us and for us, solutions from us. I want to thank all of you for inviting these experts on Black communities from our Black communities into your offices, your living rooms, your kitchens, and maybe you're even sitting in your car right now. I am excited about them being able to present to you the state of these topics that are important to us, using this platform to give us truth about what is the experience for Black people and Black communities, and share solutions for moving the needle forward, solutions that come from within our community. We're going to be talking about veterans and mental health and higher education and self-care for our community. We're going to be talking about K through 12 education, leadership, civil rights, and outdoor access. It is the culmination of my dream from 2008. And it is the culmination of everything that you all have given me this year as I have watched your voices and your experiences get highlighted. And for me to be able to connect with how similar our experiences are here in New Mexico and how unique the New Mexico experience is for us. I invite you to spend this time with us and listen to our experts as they guide us in solutions and things that we as a community can mobilize towards. It is truly only a moment within all that the many community leaders, activists, and gatherers have been doing for years and years and will continue to do. And I am excited about how we come out of this pandemic, making sure that we maintain this moment, that we mobilize with each other, and that we move forward by us, for us, solutions coming from us. And I am so glad that you are here with us this evening. Thank you. Tonight, we have some really great presenters. And first up, I want to invite Secretary Sonia Smith from the New Mexico Department of Veteran Services. I am so very excited to be able to speak with her this afternoon. It's afternoon or evening, right? To speak with her this evening. Secretary Smith was appointed as the Secretary of New Mexico Department of Veterans Services by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham on October 23rd, 2020, and confirmed on February 17th. And many of you may remember that confirmation hearing. Secretary Smith comes to the Department of Veterans Services from the Department of Health as a special projects coordinator, specifically helping guide the efforts of the agency's COVID-19 testing team. We got a chance to work with her on COVID testing and really saw her advocate for our community at that time, really making sure that African Americans were getting access to testing as much as any other community. Prior to that, she served as Director of Compliance at Southwest Care Center in Santa Fe. And before that, as Director of Primary Care at the University of New Mexico Medical Group. As a member of the United States Armed Air Force Reserve, Secretary was activated to serve as a medical technician in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Upon receiving her honorable discharge, she earned a bachelor's degree in health services management from Norfolk State University in her hometown of Norfolk, Virginia, and a master's degree in healthcare compliance from Argosy University. We are so excited to have Secretary Smith with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary.
Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so very much for the warm welcome.
So I wanted to interview you today. I know there are many people who are doing presentations, but I wanted us to be able to have a conversation because you have been such a support to me when I took over this role. And also because I had some questions that veterans in our community have been asking me. And I thought, what a great opportunity for me to just ask you these questions.
I welcome it. You know, you gave a highlight of my placement in this role. And so I don't take it lightly at all. So I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions. I am proud to say that I am the first Black person to be appointed to this position. So I think to whom much is given, much is required. So I want to make sure that our Black veterans know that I am here to represent them as much as I am to represent all veterans. So what an honor that I have. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And that is a really great place to start, right? You know, the office gets so many phone calls from constituents. Yeah. When we're out in the community, people are telling us what's happening for them. And many of the Black veterans that I've met have told me that they feel like they have to convince people that they're a veteran, right? That they're not seen as someone who's a veteran. What do you think that is? What is going on?
Well, I can relate to that because when I tell people, well, before this role, when I would tell somebody that I was a veteran, they're like, no, not you. Why would you go into the military? And I said, well, it's simple. I needed the GI Bill money. I needed to finish my degree and my parents couldn't afford it. So I had an uncle who was in the Air Force and he says, you know what, consider that. And it was the perfect decision for me. Needless to say, I wouldn't be in this position now had I not made that move, let's say a few years ago, you know, but I think it is something. I think really though, our agency, the Department of Veterans Services, has an opportunity to really raise its profile. I think also too, we really need to think about who a veteran can truly be. We tend to think, and you know, I've talked about this, a veteran, sometimes people think a veteran is someone who served 20 or 30 years and now they're retired and they don't necessarily look like me. But that's not true. It can be somebody who looks like me that maybe only served 2 years. It can be a single parent who maybe had to get out for personal reasons. I mean, there are so many different reasons why a person may have served and they had to separate. But it's our job as a state agency to try to reach as many veterans as possible. So that's what I'm challenging our agency to do now. They're telling us that there are approximately 150,000 veterans in the state. And then when you break it down to minority veterans, the numbers they're not very solid in my opinion. So I think I need to do a little more research, but they're saying there are approximately 66,000 who identify as minority. And then when you take that number and you try to dive a little deeper, I still can't tell you how many identify as Black. So that's what I'm hoping that our agencies can work together on a project, so that when a veteran contacts you, not only do you refer them over to us, but maybe we can start to do some data gathering. I think that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
To help influence
right?
what we need to do more for our veterans.
Yeah, I think many of the veterans we've talked to would really enjoy having that data as well.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And here in New Mexico, we know that we have a high population of Black veterans because we know we've got many bases here in New Mexico where people are coming and building community here and lives here, and then maybe retiring here.
Exactly. Well, Kirtland is the 5th largest air base.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, that's just one example. But you're right. Veterans are retiring here, they're separating here. And I think also too, one of the responsibilities that we have as the State Veterans Agency is to link those veterans, not just with the benefits that they've earned or to help them with claims that they may need to file, but also to connect them with my sister agencies. So I'm having conversations with my peers and saying, hey, look, you have to understand that veterans make up every component of this state. They're regular citizens like everybody else in this state, and they have needs and you have the resources that they need. So I'm working hard to get those intersections, out there together. And I'm glad to say that everybody is receptive to that. So it's kind of changing the thinking too of the other agencies, because again, you don't really think about who a veteran can be. So
yeah. And so that's a really good point, is that, you said that they've earned, right? Services that they've earned. And one of the things, I see on the news and I hear stories from my friends and stories, just other people share about how often our veterans are not getting the services.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly in our conversations as of late, some of them just feel like, what, I was just doing my duty. As a matter of fact, I was talking to someone this week. I was over at Kirtland for a change of command, and every opportunity I get, I introduce myself. And I said, gave him my card, and I said, please, make sure that you reach out. I was, oh no, secretary, I'm good. I retired. I'm like, well, tell me a little bit more about your service. And as he started telling me a little bit more, and I said, no, you qualify for some things. And his eyes really kind of got big because he'd never really thought about it. And I think one of the things that we don't do enough to promote is that we offer, the state offers rather, a tax exemption for your personal property. So you can get up to $4,000 off your tax, your personal property tax. And if you're 100% disabled, then you can get a full waiver. So you don't want to leave that on the table if you're a homeowner.
Absolutely.
So that's just one example, that we do. So we have 5 divisions. Can I brag a little bit?
Please, absolutely.
About my agency? I'm so proud. So we have field services representatives, and again, they're all across the state. They are highly trained. They are certified in what it is that they do. They are empathetic. They are sympathetic. Most of them are veterans themselves. So they have that listening ear. They're critical thinkers. They know how to make connections. And so they help with claims. Then we also have our state benefits. So if you're interested in getting a license plate, and what's good about a veteran's license plate is we get a percentage of every sale that goes into a special pot that helps us with special programs. So you're helping us when you do that. Not to mention, you get your fine license plate on your car, to show off that you are a veteran. Then we have our healthcare coordination, which is really important because we hear so much about the struggles of veterans. The suicide prevention and awareness is so key. I think, as a matter of fact, OAAA has even worked with Jamia Warner, who is our healthcare director. I think she's been highlighted actually by your office. And she does a wonderful job. Her team does a wonderful job. And we've done some suicide awareness talks that are on our website too. And mental health is actually, important. So this is an ongoing thing for us. We recently hired a woman to oversee our women veterans program, because again, we've had some women who don't think of themselves as veterans,
right,
at all. And so we realized that maybe we weren't asking the right question. Maybe we don't need to say, "Are you a veteran?" So we realized it when we say, "Have you served in the military?" "Oh yeah, back in, the Vietnam War," or, it's always,
yeah.
something. I'm like, "Girlfriend,
You're a veteran.
you're a veteran. You're a veteran. You qualify," So,
Yeah.
so again, this is an ongoing effort. And I think two other things too. We also have a business outreach. We have a lot of veterans who are interested in entrepreneurship. So we have a wonderful, stellar team that works in that regard. And just kind of bringing it full circle for, the reason I went in was for that GI Bill. We have a whole agency that works with veterans and institutions to make sure that you are getting your GI Bill benefits. So there are so many things, that we can help you with. And we partner obviously very closely with our federal side.
Yeah. That is so wonderful to hear. We just had the economic forum the other day. And so we've been talking quite a bit about entrepreneurship and how important it is, not just for individuals, but for our community, right? Is that there is this history of Black entrepreneurship and Black businesses and Black owned, historically, because we had to, you weren't allowed to go to other places.
Absolutely.
And that really has carried over in our community. But now to hear that Black veterans are also a big part of that as well.
So many programs out there, and I don't want to start naming them because I'm going to probably forget something. So I just suggest that you contact us. You can go on our website. Can I do a little commercial? nmdvs.org, or you could just Google it, New Mexico Department of Veteran Services, and everything is there. And I can assure you that when you contact us, you will get stellar world-class customer service, because that's just how we are.
That is wonderful. We love that, right? And so we want New Mexico's Black veterans to absolutely reach out to you. And so, one of the things is we here at the Office of African American Affairs are really trying to figure out, how do we move our population from 3% up to 4% and 5%, right? All of that. And so it sounds like there might be a really great opportunity for Black veterans who do not live in New Mexico to benefit, right? Like a lot of the stuff you're talking about, maybe services not offered somewhere else. How could we convince veterans to come and retire here?
Well, I think it's certainly working with the Office of African American Affairs. We cannot work in silos. We cannot work in silos. And I think that, just sometimes just good old fashioned road shows, so if you guys are, since the state is opening, we can tag along, I promise I won't talk too much, but that probably won't happen. I probably will.
Don't make those promises you can't keep.
You know how shy I am. So, but I think that we need a strategic plan, sis. We need a strategic plan to reach those areas. And I'm hoping that, I had the wonderful opportunity to connect for Juneteenth with the Buffalo Soldiers local chapter and the local chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. So we're talking now about what it is that we can do to work better together. I think more of those conversations need to happen. We need to be absolutely deliberate and connecting those dots with some of those things I talked about, that my agency, the divisions that we have, because we know that veterans need support. What's even more interesting is, as we are coming out of Afghanistan, we already know that by September, October, there are going to be a lot of people coming home. So what we're doing now is we're talking to our sister agencies about how we can be prepared for them. From mind, body, and spirit, kind of perspective, because what we don't want anyone to fall between the cracks. One of the things that we're very proud of as being products of the military is we take care of each other. And to me, that's always been probably one of the best leveling the playing field, if you will. we've served.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you take it a step further, us as, African Americans, we've served this country for so long. You go back to Crispus Attucks. I mean, I'm not a historian, but I mean, let's tell the truth.
Yes.
Let's talk about Crispus Attucks, who was the first person, to die during the Revolutionary War. Then we think about the Buffalo Soldiers, that came here, after the emancipation and served in New Mexico from 1866 to about 1900. I mean, and they just kept coming and kept serving and fighting for New Mexico. Those are the kinds of stories that I want to highlight. Yeah. And then I found out recently about this wonderful all-female, all-Black battalion
in New Mexico.
No. Oh, I know, right? That'd have been too much.
I was like, okay.
No, I think they were on the East Coast somewhere, but it was really phenomenal. And their job was to take care of the male during World War II. You're talking about Black women who were officers and enlisted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we have to highlight these stories. So, when we were, talking about Juneteenth and, and our role in the emancipation, all of these stories, again, just kind of converged, and it just blew my mind that, again, I've got to make sure that these stories get told here. Yes. And I can't do it by myself. So the opportunity to come and talk about these things are just phenomenal.
Yeah. To me. I had the pleasure of meeting with 3 of the board members from the African American Museum and Cultural Center, and they too want to promote those. And that's another way we might be able to do that, because
we have to do it.
Right. But in that meeting, they were sharing with me so many things about New Mexico history, right? That just isn't shared, isn't taught. You mentioned the Buffalo Soldiers, Tuskegee Airmen. There just really isn't enough of us knowing about our history. And, my father started teaching at Crispus Attucks Middle School in Indianapolis, Indiana. And this is my dad, Amy, I'm going to be at Crispus Attucks. And I was like, I don't know what that is, Dad. Right. And how do you not know what that is? You're, so then I had to go to the Google.
Right, exactly.
And right. So that's how I learned about who Crispus Attucks was. And so I just wonder how invested we need to be in sharing our history.
We need to be all in. I have a 3.5-year-old grandson, Jack, who is my grandson, Shine. And I want to make sure that he understands that while his yaya was in this position, and even after I'm gone, it's about that legacy building. I don't expect to be the last Black person to be in this position. Yeah. Because if that's the case, then something wrong. We need to do something else. But I think that while we're here, we all, I don't want to mess up the quote, but one of my favorite people is Shirley Chisholm. Not just because she's my sorority sister.
Not just
because of that, because she was brilliant. But because, she says something like the price that we pay is a service, that we have to give, here. I'm messing that all up, y'all. So don't text me and email me. I know I messed it up. But y'all get what I'm saying. We have a responsibility here to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And I'm just sitting here listening to you, thinking about how, we've been advocating for ethnic studies classes within our school systems. We just passed the Black Education Act, and all of those things are matching up with how do we highlight Black veterans and, and so it looks like so many opportunities. Are there other opportunities that you can see where organizations like the Office of African American Affairs or other Black organizations can really partner with your office?
I think just really thinking non-traditionally, just like what I'm doing with my team. We want to think out of the box. How about there is no box? How about check the box?
Absolutely.
There is no box. Yeah. Because again, we are in every sector in this community and in every part of this state. So yes, there are going to be some traditional places that we go, the VFWs and the American Legions, but what about the PTA meetings? What about, other, I'm just trying to think now. We are everywhere. So we've got to really start thinking about where we need to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like you said, in all the spots,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so we want to acknowledge the veterans, the images that don't necessarily play into what we think there are.
Right.
We want to acknowledge how we can make sure that that we're connecting in multiple different ways and all of the unique historic moments that we have here. There's just so much opportunity for us to uplift Black veterans here in New Mexico.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to talk with you and to have you here with us. And so I really appreciate you taking time to share more about your office. And I want you to give that website to people again, because I know that there are Black veterans who want to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. nmdvs.org. And our numbers there. And again, I guarantee you that you're going to have world-class customer service, because that's what we do. Okay.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we are going to move to mental health, and we want to have conversations about mental health in our community. And so I want to introduce our next presenter, who is Dr. Rebecca Ezechukwu. Right? Dr. Ezechukwu is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and provides clinical service and training through the University of New Mexico School of Medicine Office of Professional Well-Being, as well as the UNM Action Child Trauma Clinic, where she also provides statewide workforce training, outreach, and consultation in trauma-informed care and evidence-based treatments for traumatic stress. Dr. E's area of specialized training, research, and practice is evidence-based psychotherapy treatments for anxiety, depression, and stress, and trauma-related disorders, including provider burnout and secondary traumatic stress, archetypal, existential, and multicultural approaches to psychotherapy and psychological well-being. Dr. E has cultivated a professional focus around multicultural stress and resilience and promoting resilient outcomes for all individuals. She is especially committed to addressing the role that systemic discrimination, implicit bias, and historical trauma play in present-day health inequality among underrepresented groups. She is a member of the New Mexico Black Mental Health Coalition, the New Mexico Psychological Association, and a member of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, Child Welfare Trauma Training Toolkit Collaborative Work Group. It is an honor, Dr. E, to have you as one of our presenters at State of the Black State. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Whitfield. I'm so eager to be here today. And as Director Whitfield said, I'm Rebecca Ezechukwu. I go by Dr. E, licensed clinical psychologist. And when Director Whitfield invited me to speak about the state of Black mental health for this Black Thought Expo, I was extremely honored. And at the same time, I was a little bit daunted, just because I truly believe that there are so many people who are working to improve the mental health and well-being of Black New Mexicans. And I had to think about, with 20 minutes, what is most important and where do I put my focus? You heard, my, I think an overlong bio, but my work is really focused on understanding childhood traumatic stress and helping youth to positively adapt even in the face of stress and trauma. But the other part of my work is involved with working with healthcare providers, healthcare practitioners. And so I work in the UNM School of Medicine. And some of my work is specifically around how do we help providers to recognize their own sources of bias, or implicit bias at that may affect their ability to work with Black New Mexicans. So for today's purposes, I really thought that I wanted to provide a little bit of information relevant to understanding Black mental health in New Mexico, but really lean into my lens as a child and adolescent psychologist who really mostly focuses on understanding how youth navigate mental health difficulties when they've experienced chronic stress or trauma. And then at the same time, really recognizing that resilience and well-being can be fostered by using that same lens to understand the ways that Black Americans, Black New Mexicans are constantly surviving and coping, even despite challenges and difficulties. So I'm really glad to share this stage with all the other folks who are presenting. And I actually think that as you listen to these other Black advocates and leaders of our state, really listen for the ways that they touch on mental health, because I actually think that every single topic that's on this list really crosses into that field. So I will go ahead. I would have loved to have a Q&A interview myself, but for today I will stay with this lecture style, and I've actually prepared some slides. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I'm able to do that. All right, excellent. So I'll just jump right in here and want to talk about, what do we actually know about Black mental health? And I want to just start by saying that Black mental health is not just, it doesn't just belong to our Black communities in New Mexico. And I think it's erroneous to put all of the responsibility on our community to address this. So I say this with a little grain of salt that says, this is our work, and my hope is that there are others who are recognizing the importance of people who are not Black carrying this work forward as well. So some of this information may be familiar or new to you. So just in general, I want you to know that Black Americans make up about 13% of the US population, and 16% of that group have symptoms of a diagnosable mental illness within the last year. Now, we know that 30% of Black Americans get that mental health treatment that they need, compared to the average 43% within the rest of the US. And we also know that Black Americans are actually 2.5 times more likely to fear or have apprehensions about engaging in mental health treatment than compared to white Americans. So what accounts for this? And I heard Director Whitfield earlier wanting us to lean in to talk a little bit more about some of these disparities. So some of this information, I think this helps to paint a picture of some of the experiences that Black New Mexicans also experience. And so these are national level stats, but they do help to create a context for what we see here. So we actually know that there is quite a lot of stigma and shame associated with mental health and having mental health difficulties or challenges and seeking mental health treatment. And for Black New Mexicans and Black Americans in particular, this is really tied to experiences of historical racism, ongoing racism, and really this idea of not wanting to be identified as having more problems or being more in the public eye in certain ways for these sorts of difficulties. So there ends up being a lot of stigma, shame, it doesn't get talked about. And so therefore, sometimes mental health is not always totally fully understood as to what we can do to treat it. Other barriers to accessing mental health are sometimes folks will over-rely on faith and religion and spirituality. And I would say that I think faith and spirituality and religion are absolutely a part of mental health, and they are play a very strong role in helping folks to recover. But over-reliance on spirituality only actually can leave folks feeling as though they don't have a whole lot of control over addressing their mental health. We also know that there is a lot of reluctance and distrust that's specifically based on, of course, previous experiences of racism and discrimination. And we also know that actually Black individuals are less likely to be insured than white Americans. And for youth, that kind of underinsured gap gets covered by Medicaid. But for adults who are not elderly, there's actually a pretty significant gap in coverage. So what that means is that if you can't act, if you don't have insurance, you may, you may have providers who don't do a sliding scale fee and they only take insurance. in other situations, you may also find that that individuals don't know or don't feel comfortable asking for a sliding scale fee, if that's possible. So I put that out there because I do want to encourage folks that it's totally okay to ask providers if they offer a sliding scale fee, if they don't take insurance or if you don't have insurance. We also know that misdiagnosis in mental health and in physical health, it continues to occur for Black Americans. And in particular, there's a long history of being misdiagnosed, folks, Black males in particular, being overdiagnosed with schizophrenia, overpathologizing experiences of vigilance or paranoia. And then, of course, this conscious and unconscious bias from providers. And I mentioned earlier that some of my work in the hospital is aimed at trying to help individuals and the system recognize when this is happening interpersonally, but when this is also happening systemically. The other piece I just like to add in here, and I think it's relevant for our state, is that some recent research has found that about 70% of mental health counselors, and this includes school counselors, have reported working with clients who have experienced, who report discrimination or some sort of race-based trauma. But we also know that only 19% of that same sample had received any kind of training in addressing discrimination or race-based trauma. So this is another reason why we see the disparities, is that the providers who are there are actually lacking some of this cultural competence. And some of this other research indicates that people of color who do see providers who are mostly white may also just underrepresent or underreport their experiences of discrimination. So I want to talk a little bit about youth, because I think this is particularly important. We know that Black youth in particular are seen as older, are seen more dangerous, more hostile, which all amounts to they are seen as less worthy of care. And when youth are seen as less worthy of care, that may often lead to one, misinterpreting symptoms of mental illness or mental challenges as something else. We may miss signs and symptoms of anxiety or inattention and only concentrate on those sort of overt behavior issues. So one of the things that we know particularly about Black youth is that Black teens who have depressive disorders are almost 90% less likely than their white counterparts to have ever received any kind of mental health treatment. I just want to pause there, because to me, this number is not okay. It's not okay. There's also been some recent research that has shown us that suicide attempts across race and gender have decreased. But when you identify or when you specifically separate Black youth, suicide attempts for both Black girls and boys have increased by 73% between 1991 to 2017, right? So we also know that Black teens are more likely to attempt suicide than white teens, so 8.3% versus 6.2%. And that for males in particular, Black boys, their attempts are usually cause them more injury. So they have the highest rates of injury when they attempt suicide. So let's talk a little bit about anxiety and trauma for Black youth. One of the pieces of information that I think is super important is that Black youth who have an anxious parent or a parent who identifies as having some experiences with anxiety are 4 times more likely to have an anxiety disorder and other mental health disorders. So when I say that, this means that a child who has an anxious parent may be more likely to have generalized anxiety, social anxiety, separation anxiety, and that it may reach a threshold of it being a diagnosable disorder. We also know that Black children have more fears than other children and more reality-based fears. This is really, really important because some of these fears are related to fears of dying in particular, which we know for Black youth is actually a very real concern, right? This is not a fear that is an irrational fear, or it's not based in reality. This is a very clearly reality-based fear. Also, it's pretty common to hear folks describe feeling like they're going crazy. When I hear this is usually a really key sign that someone's describing feeling anxious and probably panicked, overwhelmed, right? So we may not always have the language to describe what's happening, but we can use some of these shortcuts just by knowing some of this information. We also know that this anxious distress gets communicated more through these physical complaints. So we may not say like, oh, this child has anxiety, but we might say, this child has a lot of stomach aches, and they talk a lot about feeling like they have a headache and some school avoidance from time to time. So those may be signs of anxiety to pay attention to. We also know that the lifetime prevalence of PTSD is highest among Black lives, and that Black youth face the highest risk for complex trauma exposure. So complex trauma is another word for, it can also be called complex developmental trauma, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, but really this has to do with youth who have experienced multiple traumatic events, or they are experiencing the trauma or the stress of their caregivers or their immediate system. And so you often see youth who are who have a lot of exposure to community violence or family violence, and also experience, let me think here, any other sort of, traumatic experience, like a car accident, for example. That would be an example of complex trauma. So compounded and usually occurring over the course of development. And then we know that the research it goes back and forth depending on the study, but between 50 to 74% of Black males exposed to a traumatic event have some sort of unmet need for mental health services. And I actually think about this too, perhaps in relation to what Secretary Smith was saying about the vets, and even trying to ensure that they are getting access to the appropriate services. Okay, I have 5 minutes. How did the time go so quickly? So I think this is, this kind of want to cut to it here, that factors that impact mental health are related to stress, racism, and historical trauma. And by the time that Black kids reach teenagerhood, almost 90%, almost all of them have reported some sort of personal experience with racism. I think probably for the majority of the people in this room, that is not a surprising stat. Now, we have to recognize that experiences of stress that we experience individually or intergenerationally because of our family histories, this can change the way that the brain and the body responds to stress. So one of the best things that we can do is understand that traumatic stress reactions are a form of survival coping. So when we see that individuals have more or increased vigilance or suspicion of people in their immediate surroundings, or are more sensitive to threat, i.e. they're more reactive, act first, think later, those are often responses to stress and trauma. And so these survival coping reactions can be seen as attempts to protect. If we can understand this in that way, then we are better able to empathize with what is happening. I think the best thing that we can all do for our mental health, honestly, is to individually practice noticing reactivity that happens in relation to specific trauma triggers, including racial triggers, and learning how to modulate that in a way that is also a model for our kids, for our youth. So I want to highlight a couple of tools that we can use to support the mental health of Black New Mexicans. And this is a model called reflective local practice. This is actually a model that was developed in New Mexico by New Mexico psychologists. And the whole goal of reflective local practice is to be able to provide healthcare providers and psychologists, mental health providers, a way of improving their cultural competence. I actually think that all of us as individuals can benefit from this model as well, which is why I placed it in here. So the reflective is all about how do we build some more self-awareness about our identity. And this really has to do with exploring your own racial identity. What are the things that you learned about race? How do you challenge even your own sense of internalized racism, internalized white supremacy? This may be, when you're engaging in reflection, you may be asking yourself, you know, who is in my friend group, right? Who is in my friend group in terms of race, SES, education level, right? That gets us to think about where we might hold certain experiences of power and powerlessness, privilege, and how that may impact our propensity towards bias. The local has to do with how do we acquire information and knowledge of the cultures that we are part of. So what this basically means are, what are the issues that Black New Mexicans face here, right? So knowing about this idea of invisibility and Black invisibility and how that impacts mental health. Local is also, how do you learn about the history of the place that you were living, or the place that, or the population that you were serving. So, you know, for me, I'm also a New Mexican transplant. I've lived here for 8 years now. And some of my work has been acquiring knowledge about the history of African Americans in New Mexico. And so this might be learning more about the history, learning about Blackdom and the Afro frontier, right? Understanding what's the art that's out there that is available for us to be connected to our ancestors, to our resilience. Right? And then practice has to do with, how do you engage in activities that promote self-awareness and cultural competence? So how do you practice having hard conversations about race? How do you engage in vulnerability to identify what you don't know? How do you outreach to learn about different cultures, right? How do you learn about all the different things that are happening within our community for Black New Mexicans? How do you cross those lines? How do we come out of our silos? Practices, what are the steps that we might be taking to become anti-racist? What are the steps that we are taking to enhance our own well-being? So I see that at 6, so I'm going to just leave you with one final resource. And this is the Racial Healing Handbook. I have found that this is a really useful tool for Black people and for white people and for people of all different races. And part of the reason why is that this really approaches your racial identity development based on where you're starting from. So if you're starting from more of an awareness of who you are as a racial being, there are activities for you here. If you are less aware of who you are as a racial being, there are activities for you here. The whole goal, though, is to be able to do your own individual work and contribute to a larger system of anti-oppression and anti-racism. So with that, I will go ahead and end so that I can stay on time and allow the space for others. Thank you so much for allowing me the space to get to talk about this. Please feel free to be in touch with me if you have any questions or comments in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. E. That is really a great look at what we here in Black New Mexico can do. I love that idea of a racial healing workbook and a toolkit. We thank you so much for the work that you've been doing here in New Mexico. And thank you for giving us some time here to really help us understand mental health in New Mexico. Thanks so much. I am very excited to present next, Danessa McDaniels. She is one of our homegrown Albuquerque youth, y'all. She is a universal poet, a striving young African-American woman right here from Albuquerque, New Mexico. The artist has been writing all her life, but only discovered slam poetry her freshman year of high school. Since then, she has been a part of the Albuquerque Youth Slam team, ranked 3rd place at the New Mexico Poetry Out Loud State Finals in 2017, 2nd place in 2019 Albuquerque Southwest Shootout Indie Poetry Slam, competed and ranked top 60 in the Women of the World Poetry Slam of 2020, and she has also organized and hosted several Black Lives Matter marches and other activism protests. She currently travels to other states to host workshops and poetry slam competitions for youth. Universal has successfully published poems with the San Antonio Library in the Young Pegasus book of 2018 and with Right About Now Poetry Inc. on YouTube. Her work varies between genres, but mostly consists of Black activism-themed writing. She is a 3-time self-publishing poet, and her work can be found online under Danessa MC or AKA Universal Poet. I am so very excited that the Office of African American Affairs gets to have you on our stage today. You have been somebody I've been watching since you were part of our Stand Against Racism in 2016. So it is very exciting for me personally, but I also think it's very exciting for us as a community. So featuring Danessa McDaniels.
Thank you so much. Yes, as a youth, that program specifically kind of just stuck with me more than any of the events that I've done for the state, because usually growing up in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, and being Black wasn't something that I knew was common. Outside of my 4 walls at home, I didn't have a whole lot of people at school who looked like me or came from similar backgrounds as me. And that was really all throughout my entire academic career in New Mexico. So I went and traveled and left and BSU'd it up and was able to see a community larger than the one I grew up in. But then it got me thinking that I'm not home. This is great. I'm comfortable in my skin. I have people who accept me, but for some reason, New Mexico is still home. So I started to work on ways I could come back and work with Black youth and get our Black youth more engaged in poetry and art and finding themselves and knowing that they're not alone. So that's what I've been doing since I've been back. I'm actually working on a documentary that I'm hoping is gonna showcase those features soon. So I will, that'll be a big announcement before the end of this year. But I didn't know until I was listening that we're talking about mental health today. So that kind of got me changing a little bit of what I had planned to do, if that's okay. I promise I won't go over my time. So I'm gonna get started. Why you talk like you one of them white folk? Why you use big words? Why your attitude so bad? Fix your face. What you mad for? Didn't anyone show you how to smile, Black girl? The first time I realized I was Black, I was about 8 years old. I walked into class, smile perked high, ready to go, and everyone's eyes fixated on me. They examined my hair and my skin, questioned why my face was so shiny, if my hair smelled funny, why I was Black. At the time, I didn't know what that word meant. Black never seemed to be engraved into my name, so I told them no. My name's Danessa. My mommy did my hair, put Vaseline on my skin so I don't get ashy, they chuckled. And then they turned around to pretend that I wasn't there. And for the first time, being Black girl felt a lot like darkness, felt like loneliness, felt like the lights burned out every time I tried to turn them on. And I knew that this was the beginning of having to explain myself to people who knew nothing but my skin tone. So to the white woman who clenched her purse as she walked past me at the bus stop, to the white man who told my boss he better have that nigga clean the tables faster, to the white girl in my AP classes who says more brown people should act like me, to the white teacher who watched as white girls and boys picked on and taunted me about the way I looked, to the president who says me and my people, all types of brown people, should go back to where we came from. I don't quite want your knockoff Gucci purse, right? Call me a nigga again and I'll show you how deep my roots will go to prove you wrong. Being an AP does not make me 5 shades lighter. I don't represent an entire Black community, ma'am. You stood up for all of your students who look like you. What exactly are you trying to teach here, sir? Your people are the ones who brought mine here in the first place. Did you forget all the bloodshed, all the auction sales and railroad tracks? My people did not ask for your presence. Neither did the indigenous people of North America, whose land you stole, peoples you killed off you, raped their women like you did ours, said us we were anything but humans, you the gods, we the animals. You taught us how to worship these gods. But don't dare ask them for help, that you tell us to go back to where we came from. Realize if you're so miserable, if you're so uncomfortable, if my presence is such a burden to your existence, then why don't you? That is one of my favorite pieces. I hope that wasn't too intense for everyone. I wrote that junior year of high school. That poem is now published with Right About Now. You guys can actually find it on YouTube. It's under Danessa MC. First Time I Was Black, WAN, WAN. So it's published and it's out there. And that's my first piece of work that I was able to put out into the world on a larger platform. So I hope you guys are able to check that out. But I'm going to keep going for a little bit, if that's okay. I noticed that a lot of our panelists today are going to be talking about mental health in the Black community, and what that looks like specifically here in New Mexico and as a large whole, because a lot of the time you're taught not to talk about it, right? You're told that having mental health problems as a Black woman or as a Black man is not okay. Like, it doesn't exist. That's not what we do here. We're stronger than that, right? We're resilient. We're unbreakable. So I had some people come up to me lately and they're just like, wow, I can't believe you're doing this. And it's like, what do you mean? Doing what? I was just eating a burger. They're like, existing. Like, you've been through a lot this last couple of years. And it's like, think about it. And you think of everything that you've gone through and everything that people put you through and what you have to put yourself through in order to survive. And it just gets you thinking. So it's amazing as humans and as Black people, specifically Black people here in a state where we're full of minorities and we still are the minority in the group. Trying to find yourself and people who understand that is rare. So I'm very thankful for this platform to give me that. So I'm gonna do 2 more poems, if that's okay for everyone. You describe me as such an amazing woman. Like, how strong must I be to still be standing? You tell me that my worries and hardships won't go unseen, that there is something bigger in store. I just have to hold on. I just have to be patient. But what happens when your hands are bleeding from all that you're trying to hold on to? Will it then be okay to give into my demons? Will it be okay to wave my flag of surrender? As a Black woman, I don't get the luxury of complaining about it. I don't have the time to play the empathy card while I bury my grievances. You see, I grieve, I ache, I hurt all the time, but I am taught not to talk about it, not to say a word when the pressure becomes too strong and I feel like cracking underneath the pavement. You see, I'm a Black woman, so that means I'm resilient. Even when I'm crumbling into a million pieces, means I'm silenced. And even when my breaking is mistaken for anger, they call me the angry Black woman, right? Like, who am I to be anything other than? And I am. I'm angry, I'm pissed, I'm livid of being strong for everyone but myself. And I know that saying this is a sin within itself. But y'all, some days it feels like I'm not gonna make it. Feels like I'm going to give in and just let it go away. My melanin isn't designed to be indestructible. I'm still human, but I'll swallow my tongue keep my thoughts from escaping. I won't speak life into the depression. Instead, I'll anchor it down. I'll hold it underneath the water, and I'll just wait. Just wait until it stops kicking. Thank you. That was a little heavier, so I just want to make sure everyone's okay. If you guys can tell me you're all right in the comments, that would make me feel a little bit better. And I'm going to do something a little bit lighter for you guys, because self-love and being Black and having self-love in this world that we live in today is the most important thing. So I just want to make sure everyone's good. Okay. All right. So this is going to be my last one. I think I had 10 minutes, but I started at 6. So if I'm a little over, my bad. But this will be my last one for you guys. This is also going to be in a new book that's coming out of mine, and it is going to be called Shea Butter Blessings. And there's a poem in that book that explains the title. So I'm gonna let you guys be on the lookout for that one. I am Black woman cracked in half on the sunrise. My blood be entranced with magic when the moon shine. I, broken rib cage of the bird who sang for the last time. You don't recognize me because my melanin pops for glow during the summertime. I stay hot and ready like I came out the oven with my tongue hot and steady. I be spiritual to the kinfolk who ain't never had a struggle like mine. See, I shine like black diamond in the sky, like the women before me. Still I rise. I be broken halo to man who was fallen angel. Be the beat in his heart when he bleeds for me. And honestly, y'all could call me a prodigy who has mastered self-love for the first time. And you know what? It feels so good to love myself for the first time. So watch me break out into sunflower. As my head looks towards the sun and absorbs its light, I am the embodiment of what it means to burn bright. Me, I am a Black queen. So when you see me, bow down and kiss me at the feet. I'm sitting on a throne made of broken hearts, my crown bones of the first boy who was supposed to love me. Years I spent wishing for daddy to accept me. I am lost girl who has escaped her way from Neverland. These wings took flight and carried me back home to the motherland so that I could be rebirthed in shea butter oceans. This is the resurrection, the prophecy, the testimony fulfilled in ink. Who am I? I'm universal. Thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate it.
That was so amazing. Thank you so much, Danessa. You should have seen us in here as soon as you said shea butter. We were all like this. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here tonight and are excited about seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Next up, we have Dr. Henrietta Pashone. Dr. Pashone is the interim dean in the College of Education at the New Mexico State University. She will serve as the interim dean for the newly formed College of Health, Education, and Social Transformation starting on July 1. Dr. Pashone has worked in academia since 1994. She earned a BA in English and a Master's of Education in Secondary English Education from Louisiana Tech University. She earned a PhD in Education Administration of Higher Education from the University of New Orleans. We're so glad that you're here with us in New Mexico now. She began her career in higher education as a retention counselor at the University of New Orleans. She worked her way up the ranks to become the director of several retention programs. In 2005, Dr. Pashone joined the faculty ranks at Rowan University, teaching an educational leadership doctoral degree program. She taught research tool courses and courses within the higher education master's degree program. She joined the faculty at Northwestern State University in 2007, where she earned tenure and the rank of associate professor. In 2013, she joined the New Mexico State University faculty, where she later earned rank and tenure. Her research and teaching interests have always included access, development, and persistence of historically underrepresented groups in higher education, including students, faculty, and staff. Dr. Pashon is a proud alumni of the AABHE Leadership and Mentoring Institute. She is currently working on a co-edited book entitled African American Leadership and Mentoring Through Purpose, Preparation, and Preceptors. It will be published in 2022. She is the current co-editor of the Journal of the Professoriate. Recent titles of peer-reviewed works include Community Ecology Model, Understanding Interactions of Racially Minoritized Students at 4 Hispanic Serving Institutions. She has made over 60 presentations and served on countless committees. Dr. Pashon, thank you so much for being with us here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And so I want to make sure that I honor our time as well. And so I'll keep us on task and I'll jump right in. So good afternoon, everyone. I just want to share my screen with you, get my slideshow going. And here we are. Hopefully you can see my screen. And I'll go ahead and jump in and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to share my research. As been mentioned, I do study historically underrepresented students. I also look at underserved as well as understudied groups in higher education. This, I am hoping, will be a conversation that we will begin tonight and continue having as we move forward, especially as we look at higher education in New Mexico. Although this presentation is only a few minutes, please know that we, like others, can engage in this conversation for hours. So as a native Louisianan, I've been here in New Mexico for 8 years now. I moved here in 2013 and I was 43 years old. That in itself was a huge adjustment for me. However, the thing that stood out the most for me was this overwhelming sense of loneliness. Although there were people to talk to, I could go for weeks without seeing another African American. And that was a little mind-boggling for me. As an African American, I knew that things would eventually get better. However, I had to admit it wasn't getting better quick enough for me. I felt invisible. And if I were struggling with the isolation as a 43-year-old, with the benefit of 25 years of experience as an adult, I had to ask the question, what must this be like for our students on our campuses, right? How do Black students experience higher education on our campuses? So the answer to this question is really important because Black students' experiences in higher education have not only been historically understudied, but also they have been underserved as well as historically underrepresented in the numbers. As you can see, Black student enrollment in higher education nationally has remained relatively steady over the last 10 years. 30% of Blacks ages 18 to 24 are enrolled in higher education. This is just a little below the national average overall. However, when we began to look at other ethnic groups, we see that whites represent about 42%, Hispanic at 34%, Asian and Pacific Islanders around 60%, Native Americans around 33%, and 2 or more races at 43%. It should be noted that 2 or more races is on the rise, while Native American 18 to 24-year-old, those numbers are decreasing, and I think it's a sharp decrease that needs further investigation. So then what do these numbers or percentages look like? The 6-year graduation rate for first time full-time undergraduate students is similar per ethnic or race. It is noted that Asian students, of the Asian students, 74% will graduate. White, 64%, 2 or more races, 60%, Hispanic at 54%, Pacific Islander students, 51%, Black students, 40%, and American Indian, Native Alaskan, around 39%. So what does this look like in New Mexico? According to the data for the New Mexico Department of Higher Education, African Americans or Blacks made up approximately 2.5 to 2.7% of degrees awarded. And this includes associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, specialist, doctoral, and professional. It was really important to use the total numbers for degrees, because what could be noted in the data presented in the New Mexico Department of Higher Ed is that if there's less than 10 in a specific cell, those numbers are not reported. So I know Amy mentioned earlier about African Americans being statistically insignificant in New Mexico. This is one of those things where, because of the low numbers, we're sometimes not counted or represented in certain numbers. So we don't know the number of African Americans who may have received a particular degree from a particular institution simply because the numbers are below 10. So we don't know if those numbers are 1 or if they're 9. This leaves us wondering what's going on. A growing body of research tells us that the sense of belonging and community are integral to understanding how students persist in higher education. When speaking of sense of belonging, we're actually speaking about a basic human need in which Terrell Strayhorn in 2012 identified sense of belonging as students' perceived social support on campus, a feeling or sensation of connectedness, and experiences of mattering or feeling cared about, accepted, respected, and valued by the important and feeling important to the group or others on campus. Belonging also refers to the person's perceived indispensability within the system and the person's sense of identification within a particular group. Specifically, students want to know, do I matter? Hoffman et al. Breaks it down and looks at 5 different constructs that make up this sense of belonging. And it looks at peer support, which looks at whether or not individuals feel as though they can meet classmates, hang out with classmates, rely on other students for assistance. Also looking at faculty support and whether or not students feel as though they can talk to their instructors about matters inside and outside of the classroom, being able to seek assistance. Also looking at classroom support, which looks at speaking in class, feeling comfortable contributing to the class discussion, as well as asking questions in class. Also, in looking at sense of belonging, we really do focus on isolation. Is it difficult for students to meet other students in class? Are they finding it difficult to meet other people? And then looking at empathetic faculty, whether or not students believe faculty will address issues that they may be experiencing. Sense of community is defined as a feeling that members have a belonging, a feeling that members matter to one another and to the group, and a shared faith that members' needs will be met through their commitment to be together. And this is a definition that I use by McMillan and Chavez. In many cases, individuals need to connect with others within the community and feel as though they matter within that specific community. Pretty much similar to that of belonging. I use the two of them together because I think community addresses some things that belonging doesn't, and I think belonging addresses some things that community doesn't. The things that I really like about community is looking at the reinforcement of needs. Can I get my needs met within this environment? Do we share values? Feeling good about being able to talk to different community members. Also, membership, that you feel as though you can trust the individuals within your community, that they recognize you, you recognize them. Influence, being able to have influence, fitting into the community, feeling as though you can influence decisions that are being made. And also shared emotional connection. It is important to be connected to the community, and you feel as though the community members really care about you and what your needs are. And so that kind of goes back to what Amy was talking about, people understanding exactly what our needs are. And so I look at both community and belonging. And so when exploring this experience, what it's like to be Black or African-American students at an institution in New Mexico, we learned that one of the reasons for some of the numbers we see can be attributed to belonging in community. In this mixed method study that I conducted over several months, I observed, I conducted surveys, and I also conducted interviews with individuals. When observing students, I found a majority of African-American students were often observed in isolation. That is, they were often seen walking by themselves, attending events by themselves, eating by themselves, and studying by themselves. They were not often at social events or university-sponsored events. Although they were seen at some events when observed, they were rarely observed interacting with other students or even other African-American students, faculty, or staff, unless they were attending an event that was specifically related to understanding the Black experience, or a lecture, or a social gathering. During the surveys, about 90 students took the survey, in which I looked at peer support, faculty support, classroom support, faculty empathy, isolation, reinforcement of needs, membership, influence, and shared emotional connections. The survey results revealed that a number of different things I can share with you, but there are a few that really stood out, and I want to share those with you. One, a number of Black students felt as though they had faculty support and empathy. However, they found it difficult to connect with their peers and feel comfortable in their classes. They also felt extremely isolated. You could see it on campus when you observed them in action. They rated this isolation in the survey, and they would later talk about it during the interviews. This was a glaring reality of many Black students on our campuses. They also felt as though their needs were not being met, and that an overwhelming number of people in the community did not care about what happened to them. They felt as though they had little influence within the community, and they could find individuals who truly shared those same experiences that they did. When I compared their responses based on events, programs, and support services sought within the last 6 months, I found that when students were connected to cultural events, programs, or support systems, they were more likely to feel a sense of belonging in community. The problem was that those events tended to be few and far in between. When interviewing students, I learned a little bit more about how they experience belonging in community on campus. This is when I asked them to give me examples. I learned that, again, Black students truly felt isolated and lonely on campus. They spoke of this often, and I saw it as par for the course. Like one of the students said, I'm just here. I'm just trying to get my education. I'm in and I'm out. They struggled with understanding their Blackness within the community. Am I too Black? Am I not Black enough? This came in the form of students indicating that they avoided Black events, while others talked about really gravitating to only attending Black events. I found that although the technologies could be used to bring folk closer together, students use them to further distance themselves from individuals on campus, using their phone to watch videos in our student center, where students usually gather and socialize. Students were there on their phones, not necessarily interacting with one another, using their headphone sets to drown out the noise or others around them. I even asked one student what was he listening to, and he told me nothing. And he gave me the earbud and showed me that he was listening to nothing. So it was a way to really keep them disconnected from the environment. The other thing that I found was that Black cultural events, lectures, programs, and history truly matters. Students were able to engage within this content, found themselves more easily able to navigate the institutional system and feel a sense of belonging in community. And so when I began to think about the implications, the findings from my research really spoke to how individuals experience belonging in community. And what we know is that when students are less engaged with the environment, they're less likely to persist. And we do see a lot of students not being engaged within the environment. So I think moving ahead, there are some implications for research practice and policy. One, we need to invest in understanding how Black students experience higher education in New Mexico. This includes both community colleges and four-year institutions. Continue to use both qualitative and quantitative data to understand these experiences, and using various theoretical and conceptual frameworks to understand what persistence looks like for individuals in higher education. This should be expanded to understanding the Black professor and staff experience in higher education as well. I have students, I have a doctoral student currently looking at Black staff, and one of our former students looked at African-American women faculty. Recently, in an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, it was noted that in 2019, New Mexico as a state had only 6 tenured Black female faculty. So when looking at the numbers of my home institution, New Mexico State, there was 1. And lo and behold, it was me. And that says a lot, because that means we have a lot of work to do. And so when we begin to look at quantitative studies, and there's only 6 of us, we know that we're not likely to be represented within the quantitative study. So what tends to happen, in order to capture the voice, we may be lumped in with other minority groups so that our numbers can be counted, but it doesn't necessarily reflect who we are. So then when we begin to look at this research and the lack of research of the Black experience in higher education, again, when we start looking at higher tiered journals and even conducting qualitative studies, they're looking at 20, 25 individuals per interview or for a paper. So if you are looking at the Black experience of female faculty in New Mexico and you have only 6, the chances of your article being published in some of the top tier journals in higher education may not happen. And so it then speaks to the cycle of this lack of getting our voices out and that invisibility that we see earlier in the slide. So then some other things that we can do is begin to look at creating campus environments in which all students, faculty, and staff feel welcomed and included, celebrating the cultures of our students enrolled on our campuses and moving away from this tokenism and tolerism to more of an appreciation for all individuals who are on our campuses. Also being able to prioritize inclusive education, support racially, culturally responsive programming, events, organizations, and curricula. Develop curricula that addresses the dearth of representation of Black history and contributions in society and in specific academic disciplines. Offer ethnic and racial studies programs that allow students to explore different cultures and contributions in society. Also, university personnel have to be mindful and make a concerted effort to participate in cultural events. These events and activities are all for all to become more connected. Ask yourself, what events have I attended in the last 6 months that show students that I care about their belonging in community? And the other question we should be asking ourselves is, what does my attendance say about my priorities? And finally, I think we should encourage space for students, faculty, and staff to work through difficult and critical conversations about issues that impact us. And so I want to be mindful of the time, and I can stop sharing now, and I can also yield the floor back to Amy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pashon. We appreciate all of that. It is the experience of so many of our Black students and our Black faculty here in New Mexico. Thank you so much. That was a really great overview. And you are exactly right. That is a conversation that we can have over and over and continue to tell those stories. Next, we have Babzi Sinendal. We are so excited to have you here today. She is the transformation coach of the Black Gold Wellness Lounge, a company dedicated to the overall well-being of communities of color. The personal development company is birthed from the life experiences of her as the founder, who learned how to successfully manage her once tumultuous life, despite being a single mother living in poverty with severe personal traumas and mental health illnesses such as PTSD, chronic depression, anxiety, and adult ADHD. Babzi is a transformation coach, speaker, wellness event curator, and the founder of Black Gold Wellness Lounge, a safe online space curated with Black and Brown millennial folks in mind. As a certified master life coach, she focuses on identifying and reversing mindset blocks that stem from years of generational trauma through her signature undoing method. As a self-proclaimed self-care strategist with a background in community health, she helps her people take excellent care of mind, body, and soul through group and one-to-one coaching, educational and healing workshops, as well as inspirational social media content. She is a mother of 2 amazing girls, raising up Black women, loves salsa dancing and karaoke, and indulges in an expensive hobby as a recording singer and songwriter. She has learned the importance of creating a life of joy and peace, regardless of one's circumstances, through reading books by inspirational leaders, getting life coaching and therapy, and following a spiritual journey that allows her to help others become their best authentic selves. Black Gold Wellness Lounge aims to change individuals' lives from the inside out, from personal development workshops focused on self-care strategies, a growing online community of growth-minded individuals, mental health awareness, positive visualization, goal setting, and more. She can help create a life you love and know you deserve. I am so excited to reconnect with you tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm super excited about this. I'm a little obsessed with self-care. That's why I'm a self-proclaimed self-care strategist. And I know that self-care is a trend word. It is buzzing out here in these healthcare streets, in these wellness communities. And so what I want to talk about, I want to add on the word radical to our self-care. We're talking about Black New Mexico today. And so as Amy stated, my mission is mind, body, and soul, generational healing through radical self-care. Now, I provide Black and Brown people culturally competent self-care products, services, and events to inspire, grow, and motivate our communities. I want to read a quote by Audre Lorde that most people in activist communities probably know, but if you've never heard this, this is an amazing quote. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. I'm going to say it one more time. Okay, because she has this right, and we'll get into it. Caring for myself is not an act of self-indulgence. So what she's saying right there is not selfish to care for yourself. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Unfortunately, we live in a country where self-preservation is not or has not historically been an option for Black people. We live in a state, New Mexico, where Black people only make up just under 3% of our population. And that can cause invisibility. It can cause feelings of lack of voice when it comes to making change or progress, you know, in our communities. I know that there was a big push for like the census and everything, you know, during COVID, and those efforts were wonderful. You know, it was great to see the community come together to create visibility for the Black people here. 3% is a very small number, right? So anyways, let's get into this. Just things to think about. Okay. Actually, you know what, before we get into it, every time I have a speaking engagement, I like to do like a centering, a grounding moment. So if you don't mind, I just want to take a moment. If you're at home, wherever you are and you're watching, I just want to take a moment of silence. First of all, I want to give respect to our ancestors and the people that came before us on this land. I want to give respect to these lands that have been appropriated, that have been colonized, and that have been taken over. I just want to give respect to those who have come before us to create solutions for change and progress, right? Let's take just a few minutes. We're going to do a breathing exercise. You're going to inhale. And when we inhale, you're going to inhale for 4 seconds. We're going to hold it for 4 seconds, and we're going to exhale for 4 seconds. And I'll lead us through it, okay? Just to kind of get us grounded, get us focused. This is all about self-care. This is your time to be selfish, okay? All right, so let's take an inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. That is a great technique to take with you. Just off top, like if you're having some stress in the day, you don't want to cuss somebody out. You know what I'm saying? Like it'd be like that sometimes, all the microaggressions that we have to deal with out here in these streets. So, all right. So again, I'm Bob C. And we're just going to dive right into this. Okay. So my company is called Black Gold Wellness Lounge, and we talk about generational healing. And the problem that we have here in the Southwest, in New Mexico, is that there is a lack of culturally relevant wellness programs that tackle specifically intergenerational trauma for people of color. Being that we do make up less than 3% of the entire state, it is difficult to find spaces for healing and development, especially for Black people. I deal with Black and Brown people, but we are talking about Black people because it is the state of the Black state today, right? So there's several solutions that I've come up with and thought about it that I would love to collaborate with the community on. But today, let's focus on individual solutions and solutions for community. So I've been here in New Mexico for 26 years. And anybody that's been here as long as I have or longer, or has been born and raised, knows that there are several different identity crises that happen as a Black New Mexican. And it can be hard to connect, it can be hard to be seen, and it can be hard to be heard. I have children here, and I'm a single woman, and you know, it's hard to date out here as a Black woman. That's neither here nor there, right? But it's a truth. It is a thing, you know, and we talk about this all the time in these spaces. And so I guess my wish for this conversation is to figure out how we could get back into community and through self-care, right? So let's go ahead and define what self-care is. So I added the term radical
to self-care. So when we think about self-care, we think about bubble baths, we think about being at the spa, maybe going to happy hour, you know, doing things like that we enjoy. Those things are wonderful. They're necessary, you know, having hobbies. So some of my hobbies, for instance, are like salsa dancing. I love to karaoke. Lately I've been getting brave enough to skate, you know what I'm saying? So that's been really fun and interesting. So those things are important. Doing things that fulfill you and you know, make you feel good are important. But when I talk about radical self-care, in the sense of Blackness, especially here, I'm talking about specifically, you know, putting yourself first while digging deep into the root causes of a lot of the trauma that's holding us back and keeping us from living our true, authentic lives, right? What that means is, so I'll give you an example. So for like the first, you know, I'm a single mother. I had my daughter at 18, so I was a teenage mother. And so for me, I went through a lot of trauma at that stage. I didn't have the language though to identify that I was going through trauma, right? It was like, you know, I'm a Christian woman, you know, I need to lean on God, but my church is like shunning me because I'm a pregnant girl. And so I can no longer sing in choir, right? I can no longer be front facing because it's a bad look. So instead of receiving the support that I needed at that time, I was expected to kind of do this thing alone. Now, my family is from South Africa, and we come from like the village mindset of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a philosophy that basically says, I am because you are. And what that means is we take care of one another. You know, a lot of different cultures have traditions in, you know, in grieving, in weddings, in different settings where we really kind of gather and we take care of one another. So when I came to New Mexico, it was really hard to cope with certain traditions here because there was no traditions that really like, at least, you know, in my early years that I saw that was saying, hey, you know, let's take care of each other as a community. It was so much different from being in the African community in California that I had moved from. So here, you know, you have to kind of create community and you have to find those like-minded people. So being having the background that I have as a South African person, we also experienced apartheid. So the reason why I'm even here as a first generational immigrant, well, I guess I'm not an immigrant because I was born here, but my parents were immigrants and I was the first one in my family born here. That was an identity crisis within itself. So, right. So now I'm like this Black girl that speaks a language that is supposed to learn English. That's, you know what I'm saying? So like going through all these things and then being called the American of the family, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I'm like, oh my God, who am I? Right. And all of this carried into just my youth and growing up, and then being told like, well, I'm a little too Black for this, or I'm not Black enough for that, or, you know, and I'm sure so many people can relate in different ways, right, of how we're told we're too Black or not Black enough, right? Whether we are like the Blackity Blackest or the lightest of the, you know how we come, we're a rainbow, right? We're beautiful. So we all have these varying things until we come into self-awareness and we start doing that work and honoring our ancestors and being proud of our culture and traditions, right? And understanding them more. I'm saying all of that to say, it is important to put ourselves first. It is important to dig into our roots. And it's important for us to really understand our suffering, you know, and this idea of like survival mode that we have been launched into due to white supremacy. Story time. Let me tell y'all something. Radical self-care is deep work for Black people. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. It is deep work for us. And let me tell you why. People try to pretend like racism does not exist on today in 2021. Racism, the idea of racism has spanned over hundreds and hundreds of years. It has taken multiple generations for people to pass down this idea that other colors are better than others, or other people are more worthy. We got Black codes, we got redlining, we have all of these things that have historically kept Black people in America down, Black people in South Africa down, Black people in other places down, right? Globally, Blackness is not something that is like wanted or, you know, envied. However, Black people are consumed and commodified, right? And so radical self-care is deep work. And it's important to know who you are and to be unafraid of saying, you know what, I've come up, there's been all of these stories that have been inserted into my Black life, almost cussed y'all, into my Black life. There's so many stories from our religious ideas, you know, where we shouldn't get mental health services because we need to lean on God, to, you know, these ideas that, you know, we're not worthy of the same pay as somebody with lesser education than us, you know, or, you know, we need to produce more for less pay. You know, there's just so many things that are put upon us that are so real, even onto today, right? So this is why I talk about putting self first and getting selfish, because until we get selfish and we start really taking care of ourselves, then we're not able to really fully functionally take care of our kids. Another example of that, and I like to use personal examples because I've done this work and I continue to do this work, and I've been on this journey for a long time. So another example of that is like, you know, my first child, you know, she and I have these conversations. So this is not something that if she sees this feed, like she's gonna be like, oh my God. But, you know, she knows that I was a whole different woman in her first, like the earliest parts of her upbringing. And so I was disconnected. I was not the greatest mother. It was like that whole culture of like, you speak when spoken to, go play, you know, there was no real connections in our family upbringing between myself and my daughter. You know, her father was not in her life, and that's okay. I mean, he's in Johannesburg somewhere doing his thing. And so now she sees how I've transformed as a mother, and now I do things differently with my 9-year-old, right? And so it's like, okay, that's nice, Mom. I see you change, but like, how do I, you know, like, how do we fix these things that happen between us, right? So when I talk about being intentional, I'm talking about really being honest and being able to say where we're wrong or where we're hurting or where, you know, these stories don't fit us anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, even when it comes down to financial, you know, stories, you know, we have these ideas of that I have to be stuck in this. This is what I've always known, and I can't change this. I'm never going to be rich enough. I'm never going to be thin enough. I'm never going to be this enough. You are enough right now. And I need you to understand that. That is so important to me. I'm going to just give you a moment to soak that in. You're enough right now. Let's talk about generational trauma and healing. If you've never heard the term generational trauma, there's studies out there that talk about it. A lot of the studies were centered on like the Holocaust specifically, and then they looked at slavery, which was a much longer span of time, and like, you know, the movement for slavery. And so studies show that trauma, especially like gross collective trauma, can be passed down through generations. And so we're talking about depression, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about stress, anger, addiction. You know, the American government has done a great job at separation when it comes to Black families. They have done a really intentional job at like really inserting themselves so that we can hate each other. And so right now, I think our focus needs to be back into how do we rebuild ourselves individually and then collectively. But I don't believe we can do it collectively until we do that inner work. So generational trauma is trauma that can be passed down until somebody in a current generation, so myself, has identified like, hey, this is an issue. You know what, let me see how this affected my mother. I watched my mother be depressed. I watched her have, you know, certain issues. I watched, you know, aunties and uncles and, you know, different people in my tribe, you know, so it's like, how do we start saying like, oh, that drunk? No. There's a root cause to every addiction. There's a root cause to every, you know, mental health issue. Of course, you know, mental illness is very, I'm not a clinician, let me just say that, but mental health is very nuanced, right? But there are root causes that we can identify that are based off of generational trauma. And once we start to identify those things and we see what stories that we've created that are keeping us from progressing professionally, socially, and personally, spiritually, once we start to identify those stories that we've created, and most of the times it wasn't us that created those stories, but those stories that have been put on us by generations before, or by the government, or by white supremacy, or all these other factors, right? Once we do that, then we can start the healing process, right? So I appreciate y'all bearing with me, because I did take a bunch of notes because I think this is really like important information for us to really sit back and think about and internalize. Like, it's not as simple as like, this person is angry all the time. That comes from somewhere. It's not as simple as like, yo, this person's always talking about her anxiety. Why is she so nervous all the time? It comes from somewhere. And so I want us to be more intentional about thinking about ourselves and, maybe some of the things that we struggle with. There's this thing called like, okay, don't judge me, but I be like, ooh, there's certain energies that I'll get into that have like a struggle mindset. And when I say that, it's like that mindset of like, yo, it's just always hard and it's always tough, right? But that's been put on us as Black people. Like, our lives are just supposed to be tough, yo. Like, you have to do the most to get, anywhere in this life. What I love about Black people is how resilient we are, though. And Black women right now are winning in the game when it comes to education. I love how Black men are really leading families and showing up for their children right now. All of these things all these lies that have been put on us, we need to undo that and really show up for ourselves and our communities. So I get excited about that. And I get excited about the potential that we have as a community, especially here in New Mexico, even though that there's only a little bit of us. I believe that, if we put little petty differences aside, we can really work together to create something dope, so that when there are new transplants, because there's a lot of Black people that don't come or that weren't born and raised here. There's a lot of Black people that come from outside of New Mexico. And so it's like, if we can figure out how to care for self and then care for each other, it's like the opportunities are limitless. Now, being what they call, statistically insignificant, I don't like that. We need to make a little bit more noise, and something that I've been really intentional about doing. And so I'm just throwing ideas out here, right? And I know we're talking about self-care, but it is self-care, like I said, is deep, it's radical, and it is us having to show up if we want to make change, right? And if we want to be seen, if we want to be heard, if we want to count, we have to like really look at this. And so like, show up to spaces where you're not expected, be that one Black person in the room, because it'd be like that. It'd be like that. It's uncomfortable and it sucks. Start inviting your homies to those spaces, and have a voice, educate yourself, research, what are these decisions that are being made on our behalf or without us? You know what I'm saying? So educating yourself about what's going on in your community is going to be everything, right? So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things, right? So obviously slavery, racism, and the after effects have left generations of traumatized people. Most of us don't even have the language to identify this. So if you do have the language, like starting to have open conversations with the youth is going to be something that's going to be exponentially like just a change. I see in my daughters, for instance, they're able to come to me and be like, Mom, I was real frustrated about this, or I noticed this. As a matter of fact, my 9-year-old, Monday night, I was out at some music event. She was with my parents. Our family has a refugee and immigrant serving organization, so they were doing some work in the gardens or something that evening. So my niece had called me. I ignored it because it was too loud, and I was like, whatever. So she texted me and she was like, hey Magazi, which means auntie in my language. She's like, Kazi was just called the N-word by some dudes. out here in these streets. And so basically what happened was my daughter was standing in the doorway of our center, and then there's like a fence there, so she had some security, but she was just basically standing in the doorway inside kind of, but she was visible from the street. And so apparently some white man was like kind of passing by, white men, and one of them was just like, what the F are you looking at, you effing N-word, to my 9-year-old child, okay? And I'm like across town, can't do anything, right? And so this trauma is continual. It's not going away anytime soon, unfortunately, because just because this generation is dying off doesn't mean they didn't teach that generation these nasty ideals, right? And so now it's up to us to teach our children how to have power within themselves, how to care for themselves, right? So we had a really deep discussion the next day, me and my 9-year-old, you know, she talked about how frustrated she was. She talked about how sad she was and scared that this grown person could potentially harm her. She talked about the fact that, you know, my 9-year-old was able to say, I don't see racism going away. I'm getting hot. So let me take a deep breath. Let me do what I say I need to do. It's an ingrained and still very much alive system that we have to deal with. And so I just want to implore Black people to really, really unapologetically care for yourselves. And so I'm going to give you some actions that we can take in order to do this. So I've been in the coaching world for several years. I remember like feeling really isolated and alone and having to kind of like reach out and on the internet, as a matter of fact, because I couldn't find anybody locally that as a mentor. So I reached out and found my own mentors, you know, people that didn't know me, don't know me still, but I was able to gain tools and skills to be able to help start self-healing. Okay. I couldn't afford therapy, you know, but there are so many people that are out here in this world that are good and that do want to see you succeed. They want to see you thrive and they want to see you start healing those wounds. And so I was lucky enough to be of the mindset to want to move into that. And so I really encourage you, like, if you feel like you don't have family, you don't have the means to seek a therapist, or a life coach or anything like that, to really just use the internet, man. Like there's so much information out here to support what it is that you're trying to accomplish in regards to growth. So I say all that to say, practice mindful self-love, honey. It might sound cliche, it might sound like fluffy, but once we start to really like, because everybody has insecurities, right? We all have things that we worry about. We have things that we don't know that we can accomplish. Once we really start to be intentional about self-love and forgiveness of self, because we all make mistakes, right? I've made too many to count, you know, and we could talk about every single one of them and I ain't got no problems because I'm okay with the mistakes that I made. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without those mistakes. However, mindful self-love is where we really take into account mind, body, and soul and spirit, you know. It means that we give grace to our process and to our journey, okay? Connecting with community is something else that I would encourage. I know that sometimes social anxiety can take the best of us. We call ourselves introverts. I'm definitely a social introvert. I had to teach myself the skills to get out into the community. Like I literally had to be like, all right, you know, how do I just talk to people, you know, like, hey, you know, to introduce myself and to like just start getting to know people. It can be really tricky here, especially because the Black community is very small. And so like our events like are kind of scattered, but you don't have to just stick to Black people. There are people that, you know, are Black, brown, white, whatever, that you can get to know, you know, and it can still be a healing process. But I'm talking specifically about our community. Let's get to know each other, because this can really cater to your growth journey. I also want you to start tapping into spiritual and cultural resources for comfort and support. So everybody has different spiritual and religious backgrounds. We all have different cultural backgrounds. I found that really digging into my cultural background has really fed into what I now practice spiritually, you know, and that's not what I grew up with. And it's okay. It's okay to change. It's okay to say no to things that we've been taught since birth, which is going to move me into my next step of self-care, setting boundaries. Let's set really strong boundaries. Everybody is like set up with intuition. Intuition is something that I believe is given to all of us. It's an evolutionary thing. It's a spiritual thing. This is what causes dads to like grab their little baby when they're about to fall off the couch. Like they just felt that coming, and like that baby didn't fall and hit their head. Or it's like when mothers like just know something's off and they call their kid, and you know, that's intuition. It's what tells us like when I walk into a room, I'm not welcome here, I'm out. You know, like really tapping into your intuition, into your spiritual, your cultural, you know, everything that makes you you, you know, and not being afraid to explore those things. Now, I don't know if y'all follow the NAP ministry. I love the NAP ministry, okay? And when I found her, I was like, I know, girl, yes! So the NAP ministry is just all about rest, right? So rest is like a radical act. Like we're supposed to like produce, right? So it's hustle, grind. But no, that's not how our bodies are set up. Our bodies are set up to rest and then do, and then, you know, whatever. So rest, hydrate, we're in the desert, moisturize, you know what I'm saying? And most importantly, well, maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, move your body. So I've been doing a lot of movement lately, whether it's going to the gym or skating or doing salsa, bachata exercises, you know, African dance, things like that, you know, like really, really foster ways for our bodies to support self. Our bodies are like ready for us, you know? So when you are intentional and take actions such as eating vegetables that I don't like, but I'm working on it because I could eat collard greens all day, but it's a whole process to cook them, right? But adding nutrients on purpose to our diets, like those are the things that we need to do. We need to understand what burnout is. So in professional spaces, in, you know, especially professional spaces, as a matter of fact, corporate spaces, you know, we can work our butts off to prove ourselves to people that we are worthy of these things that we say that we are worthy of, right? I don't know how many Black women and men have all these accolades and still have to prove themselves to people who don't even have the same. Just saying. And the burnout on that is real. So if it comes down to speaking to a professional psychotherapist, finding a counselor or a life coach, you know, I know we can't always afford that, but there are definitely resources, especially here in New Mexico. I used to work for the UNM Pathways program, and they have tons of resources there. And I just want to end us with this, okay? Right? So us as Black people, we naturally are resilient people. We have gone through so much stuff. We have contributed so much to society, you know, from the pyramids to mathematics, to science, to the arts, to philosophies, all of these different cultural things that are being like taken and like, you know, what do they say, imitated. And all these things, like we need to stand tall, we need to take up space, and we need to take our power back, because these are the things that make this world go round. Like we're not insignificant. And so I need you to understand this and to remember that even though you may not see people like aside from your family members that look like you, your contribution is powerful and it is important. And that I know that it can feel easy to be small and invisible in the city, and it struggles to like count us and all that stuff, but it takes a village. And I'm going to leave you with this. I brought this up earlier, but the Ubuntu philosophy. Ubuntu is I am because we are. This is a South African philosophy that I grew up on and that I am very obsessed with in my I'm 36, I had to think about it, years of age. And this is something that fuels me to take care of myself so that I could take care of my children, so that I could take care of my community and see healing in a space where we're not supposed to. At least that's what they tell us. But F all that, we're gonna heal, we're thriving. Black people are doing incredible things. Shout out to the Olympics team that's going to Tokyo right now. Come on, Sha'Carri. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are thriving out here in these streets. And so please don't ever forget it. Please be intentional about your self-care. I'm gonna go. I love you guys so much. If you ever want support, please reach out to us. Please reach out to the Office of African American Affairs, myself, and whomever. Take care of you. Love you.
Thank you so much, Popsy. I think that is a wonderful way to end this evening with that philosophy of all of us being there for each other, community. That's exactly what this evening was about tonight, to really share in space with our experts from our local experts within this community. And so we thank you all so much for being here. We hope you'll join us tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you.